The doctor's words hit me harder than any blow. Cancer, with triplets at my side. If you believe stories of survival, courage, and truth should be heard, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below where you're watching from, because together, we keep hope alive for every woman who's ever been told she's finished. The hospital room smelled of disinfectant and quiet fear. The walls were white, too white, like they were trying to erase emotion. I sat on the edge of the examination bed, one hand resting on my stomach, the other gripping the thin mattress as if it could keep me grounded. My body felt heavy, exhausted from months of sleepless nights, but my heart was racing. The doctor's lips were moving, explaining things carefully, gently, but the words blurred together. Stage 2. Cervical cancer. Treatable, but serious. Treatment would be long. Painful. Draining. I nodded as if I understood everything, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Just a few feet away, my triplets lay in their stroller, only 4 months old. 3 tiny lives. 3 soft breaths. 3 reasons I couldn't afford to fall apart. One of them let out a small giggle, the kind that usually made me smile. This time, it broke me. How do you tell a mother that her body is failing her when her babies still need everything? I felt the room closing in. My ears rang. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to ask the doctor to take the words back, to say there had been a mistake. Instead, I sat there silently, holding my breath, holding my fear, holding my tears. I can't be sick, they need me. The doctor talked about treatment plans, about schedules and side effects, about strength and hope. Hope. The word felt fragile, like glass. I wondered how much of it I had left. I thought about the nights I spent rocking all 3 babies alone. The endless diapers. The exhaustion that never lifted. I told myself it was normal, that every new mother felt this way. Now I knew my body had been fighting a battle long before I understood it. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Cancer didn't just threaten my life. It threatened my children's future. Their safety. Their sense of home. In that moment, fear wrapped around my chest so tightly I could barely breathe. Not fear of dying, but fear of leaving them behind. What happens to 3 helpless babies if their mother can't stand anymore? The doctor finally stopped speaking and waited. I realized he was giving me space to react. To cry. To ask questions. But all I could do was whisper, "I have babies." He nodded, his eyes soft. "And that," he said, "is why we will fight." I didn't feel strong. I felt small. Broken. Terrified. But as I looked at my children, something shifted inside me. Even in shock, even in fear, a quiet promise formed in my heart. I would try. I would fight. I would not give up easily. Because when a woman becomes a mother, her life is no longer just her own. Shock, fear, and exhaustion can shake a woman to her core, but love for her children gives her the courage to face even the impossible. The man I trusted with my life chose freedom over me and our children. At first, Marcus pretended to care. He stood beside me in the hospital room, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, his face carefully arranged into something that looked like concern. He asked the doctor a few questions, nodded at the right moments, and said all the things a husband was supposed to say. But his eyes never met mine for long. They kept drifting to his phone, to the door, to anywhere but me. On the drive home, the silence was loud. The babies slept in the back seat, their tiny chests rising and falling, unaware that the world had shifted. I stared out the window, waiting for Marcus to say something comforting, something real. He didn't. That night, he didn't hold me. He said he had work to catch up on. The bed felt cold, even though his side was still warm. I told myself he was scared, that everyone handles bad news differently. I wanted to believe that. But days turned into weeks, and his distance grew. He left early in the mornings and came home late at night. When he was home, he was restless, irritated, always sighing as if my illness was an inconvenience he hadn't asked for. I tried to talk to him, to explain how weak I felt, how the treatments were already draining me. "I just need a little help," I said one morning, struggling to hold a bottle while feeding one of the babies. He barely looked up. "I'm doing everything already," he snapped. "You're the one lying around all day." The words cut deeper than any needle. I wasn't lying around. I was fighting to stand. Fighting to stay awake. Fighting to be a mother. Why does it feel like I'm already alone in this marriage? The house became quieter, heavier. Bowls piled up on the counter. Laundry stacked in corners. I rocked the babies through the night while nausea rolled through my body. Marcus slept peacefully, or not at home at all. When I cried, I did it silently, so the babies wouldn't hear. One evening, after a long day of appointments and tears, I finally asked him, "Are you still with me?" He paused, as if the question annoyed him. "I didn't sign up for this," he said flatly. "This sickness. This mess." Those words shattered whatever hope I had left. A few days later, I woke up to an empty house. His clothes were gone from the closet. His toothbrush missing from the sink. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a note on the counter with a single sentence telling me not to look for him. I stood there, holding one baby while the other two cried in their cribs, my body shaking, my heart collapsing in on itself. The man I trusted had walked away at my weakest moment, leaving me with cancer, 3 infants, and a silence that screamed betrayal. How does someone abandon the people who need him the most? That was the day I understood the truth. He wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. He had made a choice. And that choice was not us. When responsibility becomes heavy, the weak walk away, leaving the strongest to carry everything alone. Each cry of my babies felt like a drumbeat in the silent war I was forced to fight alone. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that pain became your strength, stay with this story, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video, because every mother fighting quietly deserves to be seen and remembered. Night fell like a heavy curtain, and with it came the hardest hours. The house was dark, except for the small yellow lamp near the crib. My body ached from the day's treatment, my bones felt hollow, and my head throbbed as if it might split open. But rest was a luxury I no longer owned. One baby cried. Then another. Then all 3. I moved slowly, carefully, lifting one child at a time, whispering soft words I wasn't sure I still believed. My arms trembled as I rocked them, the weight of motherhood pressing against a body already weakened by sickness. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, reminding me how long the night still was. There were moments when I felt myself slipping, when exhaustion blurred my vision and the room spun slightly beneath my feet. I leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, afraid that if I sat down, I might not get back up again. "Please, just let me make it through this night." The treatments had changed everything. My hair began to thin. Food lost its taste. Sleep came in broken pieces, interrupted by pain and worry. Yet every time I looked at my babies' faces, something inside me refused to shut down. Their tiny fingers wrapped around mine, holding on as if they knew I was their only anchor. Sometimes, in the quiet between cries, fear crept in. Fear of collapsing. Fear of failing them. Fear that my strength would run out before their needs did. I wondered how many nights a human heart could endure before it finally gave up. How do you survive when your body is breaking, but your children still need you whole? The laundry piled up. Dishes stayed in the sink. Bowls lay unopened on the table. None of it mattered compared to the sound of their breathing when they finally fell asleep. I would sit on the floor beside their cribs, watching their chests rise and fall, tears streaming silently down my face. I cried for the life I thought I would have. I cried for the husband who left. But mostly, I cried from the weight of loving three small souls more than I loved my own comfort, my own health, my own fear. Some nights, I whispered promises into the darkness. Promises that I would stay. That I would fight. That even if the world forgot me, I would not forget myself. When dawn finally broke, light spilling softly through the window, I felt no victory, only survival. Another night endured. Another battle fought without witnesses. And as the baby stirred, ready for a new day, I wiped my tears and stood up again. Each crying baby reminds her of both the joy she lives for and the pain she must survive. He called me already dead, and now I had proof. The phone was lying on the table, face down, silent. I hadn't planned to touch it. I wasn't searching for pain. But something inside me felt restless, uneasy, like a warning I could no longer ignore. My hands shook as I turned the screen over, telling myself I would only look once. One message opened into another. And then another. The words blurred at first, but their meaning cut sharp and clear. He wasn't just gone. He was living a different life. Laughing. Promising. Calling someone else my future. Each message felt like a slap, each smile in the photos like a wound being pressed deeper. I scrolled slowly, my chest tightening with every line. Dates. Hotel rooms. Plans made while I sat in hospital chairs, holding my babies, fighting nausea and fear. He had time for love, just not for me. Then I saw it. A message sent to his family. She's as good as gone. The cancer will finish it. Start preparing. My breath stopped. So this is how he erased me. I stared at the screen, unable to blink, unable to breathe. The man who once promised to protect me had already buried me in his mind. Not only had he cheated, he had rewritten my story as if I were already dead. What kind of person plans a future by pretending someone else no longer exists? My legs gave way, and I sank onto the floor. The room felt too quiet, too empty, as if the walls themselves were listening. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stop the sound that wanted to escape. The babies were asleep in the other room. They didn't know their father had chosen lies over loyalty. More messages followed. Discussions about money. About documents. About how simple things would be once everything was over. Over. That word echoed in my head again and again. I thought of every appointment I attended alone. Every night I cried silently. Every time I defended him to people who asked where he was. All of it had been built on a lie. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. It smiled. It waited patiently for me to disappear. My hands clenched into fists. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, something darker began to form, not revenge, not hatred, but clarity. I finally saw him for who he was, not who I had hoped he could be. I wasn't dead. I was breathing. I was fighting. I was still here. And the truth was this: he needed me gone to live freely, but I didn't need him to survive. As I locked the phone and set it down, tears streamed freely, but they no longer carried confusion. They carried understanding. My marriage wasn't broken by illness. It was destroyed by choice. I wiped my face and stood up, my body weak but my spirit awake for the first time in months. Whatever came next, I would face it with open eyes. The deepest betrayal is not just cheating, it is confirming he planned to erase her existence from her own life. For a moment, I felt myself slipping into the nothingness he had tried to create. If this story moves your heart even a little, stay with me, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video, because stories like this remind the world that women do not disappear just because someone wishes them gone. The room spun without warning. 1 second I was standing near the kitchen counter, trying to warm a bottle with hands that would not stop shaking, and the next, the floor rushed up to meet me. My knees buckled, my vision faded, and a cold wave of darkness wrapped itself around my body. I remember the sound of glass breaking. The bottle shattered beside me, milk spreading across the floor like something wasted, something unfinished. My chest tightened, each breath coming slower than the last. I tried to call out, but my voice disappeared before it reached my lips. This can't be how it ends. My body felt unbearably heavy, as if the strength I had been borrowing for weeks had finally run out. Somewhere far away, one of the babies began to cry. The sound was faint, distant, like it was coming from another world. I wanted to move. I wanted to reach them. But my arms would not obey me. The next moments came in fragments, blurred faces, urgent voices, hands lifting me from the floor. I caught a glimpse of Angela, my neighbor, her eyes wide with fear as she spoke into her phone. "She's not responding," she said. "Please hurry." The ambulance lights painted the walls red and white as they carried me out. Sirens screamed through the night, cutting through the silence that had been swallowing me for so long. I drifted in and out, aware only of pain and the sharp sting of oxygen filling my lungs. In the hospital, everything moved quickly. Nurses surrounded me, their voices calm but firm. Machines beeped steadily, measuring a life that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I heard someone say my blood pressure was dangerously low. Someone else mentioned dehydration, exhaustion, stress. Stress. As if that single word could hold everything I had endured. The doctor leaned over me, his expression serious. "You pushed yourself too far," he said softly. "Your body finally gave up." I wanted to tell him I had no choice. That when 3 babies need you, rest becomes optional. That betrayal does not wait until you are strong enough to face it. But my lips would not move. What happens when a woman gives everything she has, and it still isn't enough? Angela stood by my bed, holding my hand, refusing to let go. "You're not alone," she whispered, her voice breaking. For the first time in weeks, someone meant it. As the medication flowed into my veins, I felt myself being pulled back, slowly, painfully, from the edge. The darkness retreated just enough for me to breathe again. Just enough for my heart to keep beating. I wasn't strong in that moment. I was fragile. Broken. But I was alive. And that, I realized, was still something worth fighting for. Collapsing at home, she is rushed to the hospital where Angela and the medical team fight to stabilize her, and prove she is not finished yet. They thought I was gone, but while the world slept, I was quietly building my life again. I disappeared without noise. No announcements. No explanations. Just a quiet decision made in a hospital room, when I realized that survival sometimes requires distance. Under a new name and with the help of people who believed me, I left the city that held too many memories of pain. The small town welcomed me without questions. The streets were narrow and calm, the mornings slow and gentle. There, I was not the sick woman. I was not the abandoned wife. I was simply a mother with 3 babies and a fragile hope for a future. Healing did not come all at once. Some days, my body felt light enough to breathe. Other days, the scars inside me ached like fresh wounds. I learned to measure progress in small victories, walking a little farther, standing a little longer, laughing without guilt. I am still here. And that has to be enough for now. I found a tiny house with creaking floors and windows that let the sunlight pour in every morning. The triplets learned to crawl across those floors, their laughter filling spaces that once held only silence. Each step they took reminded me why I stayed alive. Money was tight. Nights were long. I stitched together a routine from exhaustion and determination. I cooked simple meals, washed clothes by hand, and rocked my babies to sleep under the same faded blanket every night. No one clapped for me. No one noticed my strength. But strength was growing all the same. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself at first. My face was thinner. My eyes carried shadows. But slowly, color returned. Hair began to grow again. The woman who had nearly vanished started to reappear, quietly, patiently. I followed my treatments faithfully. I listened to doctors who saw me as a person, not a burden. I learned how to rest without guilt, how to accept help without shame. Most of all, I learned that rebuilding does not need an audience. Sometimes, when the town was asleep and the babies were finally quiet, I allowed myself to think about the life I left behind. About Marcus. About the lie he told the world. I did not feel anger anymore, only resolve. What happens when the woman you tried to erase survives? I gathered documents. I saved small amounts of money. I planned carefully, not for revenge, but for truth. For the day I would no longer hide. For the moment I would walk back into the light, not broken, not begging, but standing. Each morning, I watched my children wake up stronger than the day before. And with them, I grew stronger too. Slowly. Silently. Steadily. This was not the end of my story. It was the preparation. By raising her triplets, regaining her strength, and planning her silent comeback, she proves that healing can be the most powerful form of resistance. Every lie he built on my death was about to crumble under the truth. Truth has a sound. It is quiet at first, like pages turning in a closed room. Angela sat across from me at the small wooden table, her laptop open, her jaw tight with focus. We worked at night, after the children slept, when the world felt still enough to listen. One document led to another. Bank statements that didn't make sense. Transfers made in my name while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. Donations collected under headlines about a widowed husband and a brave wife lost to cancer. My name. My face. My story, sold for sympathy. I felt my stomach twist as Angela read aloud. He reported you deceased, she said softly. Filed claims. Opened accounts. Took money meant for treatment, and for the children. The room seemed to shrink. The man who walked away hadn't just abandoned us, he had profited from my pain. From my supposed death. So this was his plan all along. We moved carefully, methodically. Screenshots. Copies. Timelines. Messages where he spoke about me in the past tense while I was still breathing. Emails where he asked advisors how to finalize things now that I was gone. Each piece of proof felt heavy, but together, they formed something solid. Justice. Angela reached for my hand when my eyes filled with tears. We don't rush this, she said. We do it right. I nodded. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen, my identity, my dignity, my children's future. I thought about the nights I couldn't stand, the days I fought nausea and fear, while he stood in front of cameras, collecting praise and money. How do you grieve someone who is still alive, and call it love? We learned more than I ever wanted to know. Embezzlement hidden behind charity accounts. Legal documents altered. A public narrative carefully crafted to make him the victim and me a memory. The lie was polished. Convincing. Dangerous. But lies have one weakness: they cannot survive light. I practiced my breathing as we planned the next steps. Lawyers were contacted quietly. Authorities informed discreetly. Every move was deliberate. There would be no screaming, no chaos. Only facts. Only truth. At night, when doubt crept in, I looked at my children sleeping side by side, their small hands reaching for one another. They deserved a future built on honesty, not on a story written by a man who erased their mother. I wasn't preparing revenge fueled by rage. I was preparing a reckoning shaped by truth. When the time came, I wouldn't shout. I would simply step forward, alive, undeniable, and let the evidence speak for itself. By uncovering fraud, embezzlement, and the exploitation of her story, she prepares not just for confrontation, but for justice built on truth. You left me to die, but I walked back, alive, and the truth will not be silenced. If you believe a woman's truth deserves to be heard no matter how powerful the lie, stay with this moment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this story, because silence protects betrayal, but voices create justice. The ballroom shimmered with lights and polished smiles. Crystal glasses clinked softly as guests laughed, dressed in elegance and comfort. On the stage, a large screen displayed photos of charity work, of smiling faces, of Marcus standing proudly as a man who had lost his wife to cancer and turned grief into purpose. He stood near the front, confident, admired, applauded. And then, the doors opened. Every step I took across that marble floor felt heavy and unreal. Heads turned. Conversations slowed. I could feel eyes following me, confusion spreading like a quiet ripple through the room. I wasn't supposed to exist. I wasn't part of the program. I wasn't in his story anymore. Breathe. You earned this moment. I walked forward, my heart pounding not with fear, but with certainty. I had survived too much to be invisible now. Marcus saw me. The color drained from his face. His smile froze, cracking under the weight of recognition. For a second, time stopped. The man who buried me with words was now staring at the living proof of his lie. How do lies survive when the truth walks into the room? I stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone from the stunned host. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. My name is Elena, I said calmly. I am very much alive. Gasps filled the room. Whispers turned into shock. Phones lifted into the air. I spoke slowly, carefully, telling my story, not as a victim begging for sympathy, but as a woman reclaiming her narrative. I spoke of illness. Of abandonment. Of waking up to a world where my death had been announced while I was still breathing. Then the screen behind me changed. Documents appeared. Messages. Bank records. Proof of fraud. Proof of embezzlement. Proof that my pain had been turned into profit. Marcus tried to speak. No one listened. Security moved toward him as murmurs grew louder. The applause that once surrounded him dissolved into disbelief and anger. The man who built his future on my death had nowhere left to hide. I looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the world that had believed I was gone. I am not your tragedy, I said softly. I am your warning. In that moment, I wasn't just exposing his crimes, I was taking back my name, my life, my voice. The silence he counted on was gone forever. As I stepped away from the microphone, my legs felt weak, but my spirit stood taller than it ever had before. I didn't need revenge shouted in rage. The truth had spoken loudly enough. By exposing Marcus' crimes to the world, she reclaims not only her voice, but her life, her truth, and her rightful place in her own story. I survived, my children thrived, and the life he tried to erase now belongs to us. The sirens were not loud this time. They didn't need to be. Marcus stood still as the officers placed handcuffs around his wrists, his head lowered, his confidence finally gone. Cameras flashed, questions were shouted, but I watched from a distance, holding one of my children close. I felt no triumph, only a deep, quiet release. Justice did not feel like celebration. It felt like closure. The charges were read carefully. Fraud. Embezzlement. Identity manipulation. Lies layered so thick they had nearly buried me alive. Nearly. But truth has a way of rising, even when buried under fear and sickness. I walked away from that day lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed, but because the heaviest lie was finally gone. Life did not suddenly become easy. Healing is not a straight road. Some days, my body still reminded me of the battles it had fought. Scars remained. Memories lingered. But every morning, I woke up surrounded by 3 small faces that proved survival is not just about breathing, it is about living forward. The triplets grew stronger. Their laughter filled our home with a kind of music I once feared I would never hear again. First steps. First words. Small hands reaching for me with complete trust. In their eyes, I was not a survivor. I was simply their mother. We made it. Against everything, we made it. I rebuilt slowly. A new routine. A safer home. Work that allowed me to be present, to heal without hiding. People around me did not know the full story, and I no longer needed them to. My worth was no longer something to prove. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the woman I was when this began. The frightened mother in the hospital room. The abandoned wife on the kitchen floor. I wished I could reach back through time and hold her hand, tell her she would survive the unimaginable. What if strength is not something you are born with, but something pain teaches you? I did not erase the past. I learned from it. I turned it into a foundation instead of a prison. My story no longer belonged to the man who tried to end it. It belonged to me, and to the children who would grow up knowing their mother never gave up. As the sun set outside our window, the triplets asleep beside me, I finally allowed myself to smile without fear. This life, fragile, honest, hard-earned, was ours. Moral: when truth wins and love endures, the story closes not in darkness, but in hope, resilience, and new beginnings. No betrayal, no illness, no darkness can silence a woman determined to live. When I look back now, it feels like I lived several lifetimes inside one story. A woman full of fear. A mother on the edge of collapse. A name declared dead before her heart stopped beating. And yet, I am here. Not because the road was kind, but because I refused to disappear. I want you to understand something clearly. Survival does not always look brave. Sometimes it looks like crying on the bathroom floor. Sometimes it looks like standing up when your body begs you to stay down. Sometimes it looks like choosing tomorrow when today feels unbearable. I didn't win because I was stronger than everyone else. I survived because I kept choosing to breathe, even when breathing hurt. If I stop now, they lose their mother, and I lose myself. There were days I doubted everything. Days I felt invisible. Days I believed the lie that maybe I was worth less because I was sick, abandoned, exhausted. But the truth is this: pain does not reduce your value. Betrayal does not erase your worth. If you are listening to this and you feel broken, let me ask you something: who told you that broken things cannot become powerful? A woman's strength is not loud by nature. It grows quietly, in the dark, while the world looks away. It grows when she protects her children with shaking hands. It grows when she rebuilds herself piece by piece, without applause. It grows when she decides that her story will not end where someone else tried to finish it. I learned that healing is not about forgetting. It is about transforming wounds into wisdom. I learned that truth always returns, even if it takes time. And I learned that no one gets to decide your ending but you. To every woman watching, whether you are fighting illness, betrayal, loneliness, or fear, your survival matters. Your voice matters. Your life matters, even when others pretend it does not. Stand up in your own time. Heal at your own pace. But never believe the lie that you are finished. A woman who refuses to give up can turn pain into power and survival into a new beginning.